I wanted to concentrate tonight on the children. Can you imagine what it must be like to be a child today? I mean, my worst nightmare would be to wake up and to be a child. And the world that we live in today, because the things that they have to face, everybody always says, it's all the same, nothing's ever worse than it has been before. That's not true. The things that they are exposed to are mind-boggling. But we need to be thinking about what are the things that we can do to mitigate some of the things that children are facing today. Now, I remember when I was a youngster, the thing I hated so badly was not rats, not roaches, not spiders, snakes. Some people hate those things. I hated poverty. Some people are just fine with poverty. I was not fine with poverty. I wanted it to end. I remember there was never money for anything. I remember at school, sometimes the teacher would say, I want everybody to bring a nickel tomorrow because we're going to have popcorn balls. These beautiful popcorn balls wrapped in cellophane, and they look so good. And some people would bring a whole $1 and buy a bag of them. I never had a popcorn ball because we never had an extra nickel to spend on luxuries like that. And I used to just fantasize about what would it be like to be middle class, just to be able to do the things that other people can do. And I thought about that a lot. But we have a lot of children today who are facing poverty, who don't have to be facing poverty, because many studies have shown us that traditional nuclear families don't have anywhere near the level of poverty as do single-parent homes and other types of arrangements. There are 130 million families in the United States. Of those 130 million, there are 23.1 million traditional nuclear families. That's how rapidly things are changing. By the time a child is 16 years old, 36 to 40% of them will have lived in either a single-parent home or a home in which they have a parent and someone who isn't married to that parent, who doesn't have enough confidence or respect to actually marry that parent. And this is the environment that they are seeing and that they're growing up in. And so many of the ones who live in single-parent homes face poverty. The Brookings Institute did a study on poverty, and they concluded after this massive study that there were a few things you could do to reduce your likelihood of living in poverty to 2 or 3%. Number 1, finish high school. Number 2, get married. Number 3, wait until you're married to have children. And get a job. We used to know that stuff. Now it's news. News flash. This is what you have to do. This is a problem. So we really need to start concentrating on how do we form nuclear families and how do we keep those families intact. That's a very long and involved process. You'll have to wait till next year when the book comes out to read about that. But we need to make sure that our children are taught the right kinds of things. I remember as a youngster, I knew all the Bible stories. And what an impact that had on me. A lot of times when I was facing difficult situations, I remember when I was 9 years old, I was in Franklin Park in Boston. Some of you know Franklin Park. And there were these large cliffs made of rocks. And there were signs, "Do not climb the rocks." Well, for a youngster, that means do climb the rock. And so we were climbing the rock, and I was about 80 feet up. Wasn't thinking about the fact that if I fell, I would break something or get killed. And the ledge that I was standing on broke off. And I was hanging on with my hands. And I remembered in the book of Psalms, the 91st chapter, the 10th and 11th verse, it said, "And he shall give his angels charge over thee, to lift thee up, lest you dash your foot against a stone." I was going to dash more than my foot. And I said, "Lord, this was stupid of me." And I said, "If you get me out of this alive, I will never do this again." And you know, one of the things that did not appeal to me as a youngster were big, hairy spiders. But then I saw a little crevice, and it was a nest for a bunch of wolf spiders. I was so glad to see that. I happily put my foot into it and got off of that mountain. But it made an impression on me. The Lord really does take care of you. If you ask Him, you have to have faith. And that's what we have to teach our youngsters. But I also was not a particularly good student. I told you the last time I was here how horrible I was. I remember we were on the schoolyard playing. And somehow we started a discussion about who was the dumbest person in the school. And it wasn't a big discussion. They all agreed it was me. But then someone tried to extend the argument to who was the dumbest person in the world. And I said, wait a minute. I said, there are billions of people in the world. And they said, yep, and you're the dumbest one. Well, when recess was over, we were back in class, we were having a math quiz. And that was most unfortunate for me, because I didn't do well in math. I had a basic philosophical disagreement with the math teacher, who thought you should know your timetables. And as far as I was concerned, they were printed on the back of the notebooks, so you could look it up if you needed to see what it was. Well, that didn't work so well when you're taking the test. And of course, I didn't do well on the test. You had to pass your test to the person behind you. They corrected it, gave it back to you. The teacher called your name out loud. You had to report your score out loud. Not a problem if you got 100 or 95. Major problem if, like me, you got a 0 and just had an argument about who was the dumbest person in the world. And I knew when I said 0, they were all going to laugh and say, we told you. So I started scheming. I said, I know what I'll do. When the teacher calls my name, I'll mumble. And the teacher will think I said one thing, and the girl behind me would think I said something else. So when she called my name, I said, and she said, 9. Benjamin, you got 9 right? That's just wonderful. I knew you could do it if you just applied yourself. It had 30 questions, but she just went on and on. And finally, the girl behind me couldn't take it any longer. And she stood up and said, he said none. Well, the kids were rolling in the aisles, and if I could have disappeared into thin air and never to be heard from again in the history of the world, I would gladly have done so, but I couldn't. So I had to sit there and act like it didn't bother me. But it did. It bothered me a lot. Not enough to make me study, but it bothered me a lot. And of course, it bothered my mother even more than it bothered me. But, you know, I bring that story up to say that there are a lot of young people who are of the impression that they're not good in a certain subject. How many times have you heard somebody say, I'm not good at math? It's not true. If you have a normal brain, you're good at math. It's just a matter of how you've been taught. It's like reading. Reading is not difficult if you know all the letters of the alphabet. What if you know the vast majority of them? Let's say you know 21 of the 26 letters. The only ones you don't know are A, E, O, S, and T. You know all the others. What could you read? As soon as you started reading, you say, this is too hard, I can't do that. And yet you fill in those 5 letters and voila. You know, science and math are like that. Everything builds on something else. If you don't have the building blocks, it very quickly deteriorates into a bunch of mumbo jumbo. And unfortunately, we're seeing a real problem these days in schools. We are graduating a lot of people who are functionally illiterate. Some of you probably saw the story about 5 months ago. They were looking at 23 public schools in Baltimore, evaluating for math proficiency at grade level in grade school, middle school, and high school. Thousands of kids. Guess how many were proficient in math? 0. Not a single one. And interestingly enough, historically, when people were trying to change a society, particularly convert it to socialist society, one of the things they did is dumb down the population. Because when people are not particularly well informed, they become very easy to control and very easy to manipulate. And we see that happening in our society today. You know, how many times have you seen those man on the street interviews? And they ask people simple questions like, who fought in the Civil War? And they're like, Germany and Spain. I mean, they have no idea. And gosh, it must hurt to be that stupid, but you become so easily manipulated under those circumstances. And it's a real problem. You know, fast forward several years, I had gone to Chicago, and I was going to speak at a school there, Wendell Phillips High School in the south side of Chicago. It's in a very bad part of the city. Now that I'm speaking about Chicago, I remember one time I went there, and I was going for a conference. And I said, why should I pay all this money for a cab when I can just take the loop train and get off at the right stop, save a lot of money? Well, I thought it was the right stop. It was not the right stop. And all the people were looking at me, licking their chops. Who's going to get them? I said, oh boy, I'm in trouble now. And at that moment, a cab pulls up. And he says, get in the car. You don't belong here. And I got in the car, put my suitcase in the back. He took me to the convention area. I got my suitcase out, turned around, went to pay him. He was gone. Do you think the Lord takes care of his people? He absolutely does. But this high school that I was going to, one of the local banks had bought 2,000 copies of Gifted Hands, my first book, and gave one to every student. So when I walked into the auditorium, you would have thought it was Michael Jackson. I mean, they were all so excited. But that was back in the days before the banks and everybody else were woke. And they were actually interested in making sure that people ascended the ladder of opportunity. Something has changed in our society. But I was talking to the students about a lot of things. And initially, I said, how many of you are cool? And just about everybody raised their hand. How many are nerds? Nobody raised their hand. I said, let me tell you the scenario with cool people and nerds. I said, you got your really cool guys. They know all the songs and tunes and the latest movies, and they have nice clothes. Sometimes they even have a car. They got 3 chicks on each arm. They are so cool. And then there's the nerd, you know, his high water pants, good glasses, and he's always reading. None of the girls want to talk to him. I say, but then a few years go by. It's time to graduate from high school. I said, the cool guy gets a job flipping burgers. The nerd wins a scholarship to college. A few more years go by. The cool guy, he's still flipping burgers, but he's cool. The nerd has finished college, gotten his degree, has gotten a job with a Fortune 500 company, gets a big signing bonus. First stop, he goes to the tailor, gets some nice clothes. Next stop, he goes to the Jaguar dealer, gets a nice car, nice place to live. And now the girls are saying, don't I know you? I said, that's the way it works in life, guys. And by the time I finished talking, I said, now how many of you are nerds? Just about everybody raised their hand. But you know, interestingly enough, we live in a society now where I probably would not be welcomed in a school like that because they don't want them to hear that message. They work strenuously to keep conservative, logical messages away from people, you know, particularly in our universities. It's amazing. I remember not too many years ago, I was invited by Al Sharpton, of all people, to speak at his National Action Network. They have this every year in New York. And I remember he was introducing me, and everybody had their arms folded. Oh, no, not Carson. He's part of the Trump administration. Oh, no, how could he ask us to listen to this guy? But, you know, I spoke to them, and I told them all kinds of historical things that people don't generally know. And at the end, standing ovation, people wanted pictures and autographs, and Sharpton's like, are these my people? What's going on? But they try so hard to keep conservative views away from people because they know that they make sense, and they know that they can explain them, you know?
Hey, this is Pastor Allen. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, like it, and most importantly, share it with your friends. If you want to be notified when there's new content, when we post new material, if you'll just subscribe to my channel and hit the bell, you'll get the notification. Most of all, I pray God blesses you as you continue on your spiritual journey and open your heart to the Lord. God bless.